White billionaire calls security on black teens minutes later. A black CEO cancels her power. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The tension fills the air as a group of young black teens sit quietly in the luxurious lobby of an upscale resort, the hum of soft conversations around them barely reaching their ears. Dressed casually, they're just trying to enjoy a moment, unaware that their presence in this space will soon be challenged. At the far end of the room, Catherine, a white billionaire with a reputation for hosting exclusive parties, notices them. With a condescending glance, she walks over to the front desk, eyeing the teens. Her disdain is clear as she speaks to the staff, her voice laced with judgment, before casually ordering security to remove them. They don't belong here. The tension rises, and the teens, confused and stunned, find themselves targeted. Just as Catherine believes she's in control, the door opens, and in walks Vanessa Clark, a poised and composed black CEO, dressed simply but elegantly. Her presence is commanding, though no one knows who she is yet. She walks past the group of teens, who are still processing the situation, unaware of the storm about to hit. Catherine, oblivious to who Vanessa is, continues with her calls, confident that everything is under control. But when she spots Vanessa, recognition flickers across her face. This is where everything changes, because Vanessa is not just anyone. She is the CEO of the very resort Catherine thinks she rules. As Catherine escalates the situation, confident in her position, it's Vanessa who will turn the tables. She watches from a distance, waiting. Then, she makes her move. "I own this place," she declares, her voice calm but firm. The words hit like a thunderclap. The room freezes. Catherine stumbles, realizing her power is slipping away. This wasn't a random act of defiance, it's a reckoning. And it's happening now. Stay with us as this story unfolds, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Vanessa doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Her next moves are measured and deliberate. With a simple phone call, she activates the protocol that will unravel everything Catherine and her team believe they control. Security is on standby, but not for the reasons Catherine expects. She orders the immediate deactivation of their access to the resort's systems, locking them out in real time. Catherine watches in disbelief as her authority crumbles before her eyes. The staff who once served her with unquestioning loyalty now look at each other, unsure of what's happening. Vanessa steps forward, calm and composed, contrasting sharply with the chaos Catherine tries to maintain. "You called me a fraud in the company I own," Vanessa says, her voice steady but piercing. Catherine's face drains of color. She realizes, in that moment, she's lost, not just the respect of everyone in the room, but the control she once wielded so effortlessly. "It's over," Vanessa adds, her eyes locking onto each of the staff members who had been complicit in the discrimination. The room feels different now. The power dynamics have shifted. Catherine tries to salvage the situation, but it's too late. The damage is done, and the consequences are swift. As the CEO pulls the strings of justice, Catherine and her team are escorted out, their roles in this institution reduced to a distant memory. Vanessa turns to the teens, who are still standing in stunned silence. Her expression softens, and she nods towards them. "This space belongs to all of us," she says. The teens, once unsure of their place here, now stand taller, knowing they've witnessed something extraordinary. This isn't just a victory for Vanessa, it's a victory for anyone who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Vanessa stood tall in the lobby, her presence now undeniable, like a calm storm waiting to unleash its full force. As the realization of her identity spread like wildfire through the room, Catherine's face twisted with disbelief, her grip on the power she thought she controlled slipping further by the second. Security had been called, but not for the reasons Catherine expected. Vanessa knew the game Catherine was playing, and she had no intention of letting it go unchallenged. With a composed expression, Vanessa glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the staff who had once blindly followed their boss's orders, all of them now looking to her for guidance. The tension in the room was palpable, yet Vanessa's voice cut through it like a blade, calm but heavy with authority. "This institution doesn't belong to you, Catherine," she said, her words deliberate, each syllable carrying the weight of someone who had earned every inch of their power. Catherine, still stunned, attempted to muster a response, but her voice faltered as she realized the truth in Vanessa's statement. Vanessa continued, "You've built a reputation on exclusion, on discrimination, on treating people as less than because of their color. That stops now." As the words left her lips, Vanessa turned to the staff who had been complicit in Catherine's actions. "And that includes you," she said, her eyes narrowing in disappointment. The staff exchanged uncertain glances, their previous loyalty now in question. It was clear, Vanessa had taken control, and the power dynamics that once favored Catherine had been shattered. The security guards, who had been prepared to remove the teens, now stood frozen, caught between the two forces in the room. Vanessa reached for her phone, her fingers moving swiftly as she activated the protocol that would disable the access of everyone involved in the discrimination, including Catherine's. As the security systems locked out the staff, Vanessa's voice remained steady, unwavering. "You may think you're above it all, Catherine, but now you're going to see how it feels to lose everything in the blink of an eye," she said. Catherine's confidence cracked, her face pale as she realized the magnitude of the situation. Her attempts to salvage control fell flat, and her power, which had once seemed so unshakable, was gone. With one call, Vanessa had turned the tables, making it clear that no one was above accountability, not even the richest among them. "You'll be escorted out," Vanessa added, her voice cutting through the room as Catherine's eyes widened in shock. The security guards, now under Vanessa's command, approached Catherine, who stood frozen, unwilling to believe what was happening. Her empire was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As the guards led her away, Vanessa turned to the teens, still standing in the corner, watching the drama unfold. Their faces were a mix of awe and confusion, unsure if this was real or just some elaborate performance. Vanessa gave them a reassuring smile before turning back to the staff. "This is how power should be wielded: calm, controlled, and just," she said. Her gaze softened for a moment, but the resolve in her eyes remained. "And from now on, this space will reflect that," she added, as the room slowly began to settle into a new reality. The once tense and hostile atmosphere was now filled with a sense of respect, with Vanessa standing as the undeniable authority in the room, and Catherine, the woman who had once ruled with unchecked arrogance, now nothing more than a distant memory. Vanessa stood in the center of the lobby, the weight of her actions sinking in, as the room began to settle into an eerie silence. Catherine, now escorted out by security, was still in a daze, her mind racing as she processed the rapid downfall of her control. The staff, who had once blindly followed her, now exchanged uneasy glances, their faces a mix of guilt, confusion, and, for some, a hint of relief. Vanessa's calm demeanor never wavered. Her steady presence was a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. As the last of the security team left the room, she turned to the group of teens who had been unjustly targeted, their faces still filled with uncertainty. "You're safe here," Vanessa said, her voice soft but firm, offering a sense of reassurance that the teens had not expected. They stood a little taller now, their initial shock replaced with an unfamiliar feeling: respect. Vanessa's gaze swept across the room, and for a moment, the quiet tension shifted. The power dynamics had shifted entirely, and it was clear that this moment would change everything. No one should ever be made to feel like they don't belong. Vanessa continued, her words carrying the weight of everything she had fought for in her life. She paused, allowing the gravity of her statement to settle in. "And from now on, this place will reflect that." The staff remained silent, some avoiding her gaze, others looking to her for direction, and even the few remaining guests who had witnessed the events unfold seemed to understand that something monumental had just happened. It was more than a simple act of retribution. It was a declaration, a signal that the culture of exclusion and discrimination would no longer be tolerated under Vanessa's watch. She turned back to the staff, her expression hardening. "I want to make it clear that this isn't just about one incident, one individual," Vanessa said, her tone sharp. It's about the system that allowed this to happen in the first place. And that system ends now. Her eyes locked onto each of the staff members who had been complicit in Catherine's actions, their faces reflecting varying degrees of guilt and regret. "You will all be held accountable," she added, her voice unwavering. The silence in the room deepened as the weight of her words settled in. "This is a warning," Vanessa continued, her voice rising just slightly. "From now on, if you treat anyone with the same disdain that Catherine showed today, I will be the one holding you accountable. Understand?" The staff nodded, some visibly shaken, others still processing the full extent of what had just occurred. Vanessa's gaze softened for a moment, the harshness of her words replaced with something else, something that resonated deeply with the group. It was leadership, and it was clear that she had earned their respect. As the room began to return to normal, Vanessa turned back to the teens, who were still standing in the corner. "Come on," she said with a smile. "Let me show you around. This place was meant for people like you, and from now on, you'll be treated as you should have been from the start." The teens looked at each other, still in shock, but now, a sense of pride began to rise in them. Vanessa had not only righted a wrong, but had made a statement that would echo far beyond these walls. This was a turning point, and they had just witnessed a new kind of power, one that was quiet, but undeniably powerful. As Vanessa guided the teens through the now quiet lobby, the weight of the moment settled in. The once oppressive air of judgment had been replaced with an unexpected sense of freedom, and the quiet hum of the resort felt different, lighter. Vanessa walked alongside them, her calm presence making it clear that she wasn't just any CEO, she was a force for change. "This place," she said, gesturing around the luxurious space, "was never meant to exclude anyone. Not because of how they look, not because of how they speak, and certainly not because of the color of their skin." The teens, still absorbing the rapid turn of events, exchanged glances, their eyes wide with disbelief, but also a new sense of understanding. They had just witnessed something extraordinary. For the first time, they were being treated as equals, as they should have been all along. Vanessa paused as they reached a lounge area, her gaze shifting back to the staff, who had gathered near the front desk, awaiting her next command. She addressed them, her voice steady but laced with authority. "This moment, this action, is only the beginning," Vanessa said. "Today, I've shown you that no one is above accountability. But tomorrow, we start a full review of the way we operate here. Every policy, every practice, and every person who walks through that door will be treated with the respect they deserve, no exceptions." The staff stood silently, the earlier defiance of some now replaced with a growing sense of apprehension. They had seen what Vanessa was capable of, and it was clear that she was not going to let them slide on their past actions. "I want to make one thing very clear," Vanessa continued, her gaze hardening. "Any one of you who chooses to perpetuate this culture of exclusion, who chooses to make anyone feel less than they are, will be held accountable. And I will make sure of it." The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, the staff felt the true power of their position slip away. They were no longer the unquestioned enforcers of an oppressive system. They were now the ones who would have to answer for it. As Vanessa turned back to the teens, she could see the shift in their faces. They were no longer the intimidated kids who had been pushed aside. They were the future. "Come on," Vanessa said, offering a genuine smile. "Let's make sure you get the full experience here. No one should ever have to feel like they don't belong, especially in a place like this." The teens nodded, their confidence growing with every step they took. As they walked together through the resort, Vanessa couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride, not just for what she had accomplished today, but for the world she was helping to build. A world where no one would ever have to question their right to be seen, to be heard, to belong. The lessons learned in this moment, in this space, would ripple outward, and Vanessa knew that the change had only just begun. As Vanessa and the teens continued their walk through the resort, a sense of change hung in the air, tangible and powerful. Vanessa could feel the shift, not just in the atmosphere, but in herself as well. This was more than a victory, it was the beginning of something much bigger. She stopped at a balcony overlooking the resort's beautiful grounds, the sun beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the luxurious property. The view was stunning, but it was the people that mattered most. I know this all feels surreal, Vanessa said, glancing back at the teens, but you've just witnessed something you may not fully understand right now. What happened today wasn't just about one woman or one moment. It's about the kind of world we want to live in. The teens nodded, still in awe, processing the weight of what they had seen. You were treated like you didn't belong here, Vanessa continued, and it wasn't your fault. It was the system, the way some people view the world. But the system is broken, and I won't let it stand anymore. Vanessa's voice was calm, but the conviction behind it was unmistakable. The teens, once unsure of themselves, were now standing a little taller, their doubts slowly being replaced by a quiet confidence. Vanessa smiled, proud of the impact this moment was having. I didn't do this for you, she said softly, turning back to face them. I did it because this kind of injustice shouldn't happen to anyone. No one should ever be made to feel like they don't belong because of how they look, who they are, or where they come from. And that's why we're changing things here starting right now. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Today, I showed you that power doesn't have to be loud or aggressive, Vanessa said, her tone steady. It doesn't have to intimidate. Real power is about standing firm for what's right, even when others try to tear you down. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to speak the truth. Vanessa turned back to the resort, her eyes scanning the now quiet building. The staff, once so sure of their control, were now scattered throughout the space, their faces full of uncertainty. They're scared, she said, more to herself than to the teens. They should be. It's not just about making them pay. It's about showing them that they can no longer get away with treating people like that. Today, they'll remember, and from now on, they'll have to answer to a new standard. The teens looked at each other, slowly understanding the depth of what Vanessa had just said. What are you going to do now? One of them asked. Vanessa smiled, her eyes glinting with determination. I'm going to make sure they understand the meaning of accountability. But more than that, I'm going to make sure that this place, this company, and this world becomes a place where people like you are never, ever treated like they don't belong again. She turned back to them, the sun now fully setting behind her, casting a warm glow over the scene. You are the future, Vanessa said, her voice full of pride. And the future starts now. The teens, inspired by her words and her actions, nodded in unison, their faces now full of hope. As they walked together back into the resort, the path before them felt a little brighter, a little more certain. Vanessa had taken a stand, and in doing so, had shown them the power of one person, standing up for what was right, to change everything. As Vanessa and the teens entered the heart of the resort, the atmosphere felt different. The air was heavy with anticipation, but there was also a newfound sense of hope. Vanessa, with every step she took, carried with her the weight of not just her own power but the responsibility to reshape an entire system. The teens followed closely, their faces a mix of awe and inspiration. They had been witnesses to something extraordinary, something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Vanessa paused in the main lobby, where the staff stood frozen, their eyes shifting nervously, uncertain of what would come next. She faced them, her expression calm, but there was an unmistakable intensity in her gaze. The silence in the room was thick, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for her to speak. Vanessa's voice, when it came, was steady and clear, like a call to order. This is the turning point, she said, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. I've given you a chance to show that you can do better, but that means you must act better. I'm not here to take revenge. I'm here to ensure this place becomes one where people are treated with respect, no matter who they are. The staff, once loyal to Catherine, now found themselves at a crossroads. Their faces, full of uncertainty, were slowly starting to change. Some of them nodded, understanding that this was their moment of reckoning. You will all undergo retraining, Vanessa continued, her voice unwavering. Every one of you will be held accountable for your actions, and every person who walks through those doors will be treated with dignity. Her words rang out, resonating deep within the walls of the resort. The shift was happening right then, right in front of them. The teens watched closely, their eyes wide with the realization that what they were seeing was not just a confrontation, it was a transformation. Vanessa turned to the group, her expression softening as she addressed them directly. "You've seen what happens when people stand up for what's right," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "You've seen the power of your own voice, and now you get to help shape the world you want to live in." One of the teens, Jamal, nodded slowly, his face filled with a new sense of purpose. "I never thought it could be like this," he admitted quietly. "I thought people like us had no say in what happened, like we were always going to be on the outside." Vanessa smiled, a quiet strength in her expression. "No one should ever be made to feel like they don't belong," she said firmly. "And I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen here, not on my watch." She turned back to the staff, who were now visibly uncomfortable, some shifting their weight, others avoiding her gaze. "We will start over," Vanessa said, her voice taking on a more resolute tone. "From this moment forward, every single policy, every interaction, every choice will be rooted in fairness and respect. This place will reflect the values we all deserve." As Vanessa's words settled into the room, the staff stood in stunned silence. It was clear that things had changed irrevocably. Catherine's influence, once so powerful, had crumbled in a matter of hours. And Vanessa, with her quiet authority, had ensured that the future would look very different. Vanessa turned to the teens once more. "This is your world now," she said, her voice full of hope and confidence. "And I'll be here to help you change it for the better." With those final words, the teens stood a little taller, their fears replaced by the excitement of knowing that they, too, could make a difference. They had seen the power of standing up, of speaking out, and now they knew what it felt like to be seen. As Vanessa walked alongside them, leading them toward the future, they could feel the shift. This was just the beginning. As Vanessa led the teens through the now transformed lobby, the atmosphere felt heavier, but not with tension this time. It was with anticipation. The silence in the air was no longer oppressive. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, where everything holds its breath before the next move. The teens, once hesitant and uncertain, were now walking with newfound confidence, their steps in sync with Vanessa's quiet authority. They had seen a powerful woman take a stand, not just for them, but for something much larger, something that could impact everyone who walked through these doors. As they moved forward, Vanessa's voice broke the silence, calm but resolute. "Today was a necessary shift," she said, glancing back at the teens. "It wasn't just about one person. It was about making sure no one will ever feel like they don't belong here again." The teens nodded, their expressions still a mix of disbelief and admiration. For the first time, they truly understood what it meant to be seen not just as they were, but as equals, deserving of respect and dignity. Vanessa continued, her gaze now fixed on the future. "I know you've been taught to doubt yourselves, to question whether you truly belong in spaces like this," she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had fought that very battle. "But you do belong. You've always belonged." She paused, letting her words settle in. "And you're going to make sure others know that too." Jamal, one of the teens, spoke up, his voice filled with a mix of gratitude and determination. "I never thought this would happen," he said, his eyes reflecting a new sense of purpose. "I always thought the system was too big, too strong for anyone to change it." Vanessa smiled, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "The system can be changed," she said. "It starts with people like you, standing together, refusing to accept what's wrong." As they reached the center of the lobby, where the staff had gathered, Vanessa stopped, turning to face them. She could see the discomfort etched on their faces, the uncertainty of what would happen next. "You've all seen what happens when the system is allowed to perpetuate injustice," she said, her voice steady but filled with weight. "Now, you will see what happens when we hold ourselves and each other accountable. This place will no longer tolerate the exclusion, the bias, the discrimination." The staff stood in silence, their eyes averted, clearly uncomfortable, but also beginning to realize the magnitude of what was happening. They had been part of the system, either willingly or not, but now they were being asked to change, to reflect on their role in this transformation. "You will be retrained," Vanessa continued, her words cutting through the room. "You will understand what it means to serve all people with respect, to create a space that everyone, regardless of their background, feels welcome in. And if you can't do that, you won't be working here anymore." There was a long pause, and Vanessa let her words sink in. The room was heavy with the realization of how much was at stake, but Vanessa remained calm, unwavering in her resolve. "This is just the beginning," she said, turning back to the teens with a warm smile. "Together, we will rebuild this place. And together, we will make sure no one ever feels less than because of who they are again." The teens nodded, their confidence growing with every word Vanessa spoke. As they turned and walked toward the doors, they knew this wasn't just a moment, it was the start of something much bigger. It was the beginning of a movement that would change not just this resort, but the world beyond it. As Vanessa and the teens stepped outside into the fresh evening air, the weight of the past few hours still hung heavily over them. But there was a sense of victory, a feeling that something had shifted permanently. The resort, once a symbol of exclusivity and power, now stood as a reminder of the change that had just taken place. Vanessa looked at the teens, who were walking alongside her, their eyes wide with disbelief but also with a newfound sense of hope. They had seen a powerful transformation unfold before their eyes, and they knew they were witnessing a turning point, not just for the resort, but for everything that had led up to this moment. "You've just been part of something historic," Vanessa said, her voice low but filled with pride. "What you saw today is just the beginning. It's the start of a new world, one where no one will be made to feel less than because of who they are." Jamal, one of the teens, looked up at her, his face a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I never thought I'd see something like this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it was even possible. But seeing you do what you did, calling it out, taking charge, it's like you gave us permission to be who we are, to stand up and not back down." Vanessa smiled at him, her heart swelling with pride. "You've always had that permission," she said, her tone warm but firm. "You just needed someone to remind you of it. Now, you have the power to remind others." The group continued walking, their footsteps in sync, the weight of the past few hours starting to feel like a distant memory. But Vanessa knew that this was only the beginning. There was much work to be done. The teens were now walking with a purpose, heads held high, ready to be the change they wanted to see. They were not the same people who had walked into that lobby just hours ago. They had witnessed a transformation, not just in the resort, but in themselves. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," Vanessa continued, her voice steady with determination. "We're going to make sure this place is a model of inclusion, where everyone is treated with dignity, no matter their background. But it won't just be here. This change has to spread. It has to be a movement." The teens looked at each other, nodding in agreement. They understood now that the battle wasn't just about one incident, one woman. It was about dismantling the systems that allowed discrimination to thrive. "So what's next?" one of the teens asked, their curiosity piqued. Vanessa paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if envisioning the future. "Next, we build a world where people like you don't have to fight to be seen," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We start with small steps here, in this place, with these people, but we won't stop until the message is clear. There is no place for hate, no room for discrimination, not anywhere." She turned to them, her expression filled with quiet strength. "And it starts now, with all of you. You've seen the power of standing up. Now, it's your turn to lead, to speak up when you see injustice, to make sure no one else ever feels invisible again." The teens, now fully aware of the magnitude of what they had witnessed, stood taller, their spirits lifted by the promise of what was to come. They weren't just standing by now, they were part of something bigger. As they walked forward, the sky above them seemed to stretch out, endless and full of possibility. Vanessa knew this was the start of something that would change the world, one step at a time. The next morning, as the sun rose over the resort, casting a warm light across the sprawling grounds, Vanessa stood in the now empty lobby, deep in thought. The events of the day before felt like a turning point, not just for the resort, but for the world she was trying to build. She had set a precedent, but there was still so much to be done. The battle for equality, for true justice, was far from over. As she stood there, her phone buzzed, and she looked down at the screen. It was a message from Carla, her trusted assistant. "The internal audit is complete," it read. "We flagged the discriminatory policies, and the staff retraining program has already been scheduled. The changes are already in motion." Vanessa smiled to herself. It was happening. The change she had promised was becoming a reality, piece by piece. She typed a quick reply. Great. Let's make sure this extends to all our properties. We're setting a new standard. Just as she hit send, the door to the lobby opened, and the teens from yesterday walked in, their faces filled with excitement and curiosity. They had come to see the change for themselves, to witness the impact of what Vanessa had started. As they approached, Vanessa turned toward them, her expression warm. I'm glad you're here, she said. Today is the first official day of change. This isn't just about what we did yesterday, it's about building something that lasts. The teens nodded, their eyes bright with anticipation. We're ready, Jamal said, his voice steady. We're ready to help, to make sure this goes beyond just one place. This needs to go everywhere. Vanessa's heart swelled with pride. She had given them the tools to stand up for what was right, and now they were ready to take those tools and use them to build a better world. And you will, she said, her voice full of conviction. You are the future. It's time to show everyone what real change looks like. The group gathered around, and for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of footsteps echoing in the vast space. The air felt lighter, charged with possibility. It wasn't just about a policy or a single action anymore. It was about a movement that had started here, in this place, and would spread far beyond it. The teens looked to Vanessa, and she could see in their eyes that they understood. This was the beginning of something monumental, something that would change the way the world saw them, and how they saw themselves. We'll make sure no one ever feels like they don't belong, one of the teens said. Vanessa nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. That's right, and together, we'll make sure the world knows it. She turned toward the doors, the morning sun now fully illuminating the path ahead. Let's get to work. As they walked out into the bright new day, the weight of what they had accomplished and the promise of what was yet to come hung in the air, tangible and undeniable. The world had just been given a glimpse of what real change looked like, and Vanessa knew this was only the beginning. As Vanessa and the teens walked through the resort, the hum of activity around them felt different, almost as if the place itself had been reborn. The staff, who had once walked with a sense of superiority, now moved with caution, aware that everything had changed. The policies that once protected their privilege had been dismantled, and the walls of exclusion were no longer standing. Vanessa glanced at the teens, who were quietly observing the shift in the atmosphere, their eyes wide with a mix of wonder and realization. They had seen the power of standing up for what was right, but they were now beginning to see how that power could spread, how it could create ripples of change that extended beyond this place. This is what progress looks like, Vanessa said, her voice low but firm. It's not always loud or immediate, but it's real, and it's lasting. Jamal, who had been walking beside her, turned to her with a thoughtful expression. But how do we make sure this doesn't just stay here? He asked. How do we make sure this is just the beginning? Vanessa smiled, her gaze shifting to the horizon beyond the resort. By never stopping, she said. By holding everyone accountable, every day. By making sure this work doesn't get lost or forgotten. She stopped walking and turned to face the group. You're part of this now. You have the power to take what you've learned here and bring it into the world. Speak out when you see injustice, and never let anyone forget what this place became. The teens looked at each other, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to determination. They had witnessed something extraordinary, and now they were ready to carry it forward. You showed us that change is possible, Elia said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. Now, we'll make sure that change continues. Vanessa nodded, pride swelling in her chest. That's exactly it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You've seen how quickly things can shift when people stand together. Now, take that energy and spread it. Don't let anyone tell you that it's too hard, that it's impossible. You're proof that it isn't. As they continued walking, a sense of unity settled over them. The teens were no longer just bystanders in a system of inequality. They were active participants in the revolution, the movement for change that Vanessa had ignited. And with every step they took, that movement grew stronger. Vanessa knew that this was only the beginning. The real work had only just started, and she was ready to lead the charge. We're going to do this right, she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. And we'll make sure that no one ever has to fight alone again. The teens nodded, their faces now filled with a quiet resolve. They had seen the difference one person could make. And now, they were ready to show the world what real change looked like. The next few days passed quickly, but the change that had begun in the resort was unmistakable. Vanessa walked through the property, her eyes scanning the once familiar space, now filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The staff who had once treated certain guests with disdain now moved with humility, their attitudes slowly shifting under the new policies. Vanessa knew that the true test was yet to come. Change had been set in motion, but it would take time to fully reprogram a system that had been built on exclusion for so long. As she walked, she was joined by the teens, who had been helping her with the transition. They were eager to get more involved, to be part of the solution, and their energy was contagious. "We've got a long way to go," Vanessa said, glancing over at Jamal, who was walking alongside her. "But what's important is that we've shown people that change isn't just possible, it's necessary. And we're not stopping here." Jamal smiled, his face filled with a quiet determination. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he said, his voice steady, "about how we can't let people forget what happened here. I want to make sure we're spreading this message. I want to take it everywhere." Vanessa nodded, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "That's exactly what I want you to do," she said. "Take what you've learned and help others understand that they have the power to change things too. This isn't just about one resort, one town, one community, it's about the world. It's about showing everyone that they have a place, that they belong, no matter where they come from or who they are." As they walked, the group passed by a few guests who had been there during the incident. They looked up, their eyes meeting Vanessa's with a mix of respect and admiration. One of the guests, an older woman, stopped them. "I just want to say thank you," she said, her voice shaky, but full of sincerity. "What you did here, what you're doing, it's giving people like me hope. I've been treated badly here before, but now I know it doesn't have to be that way. You've made a difference." Vanessa smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "We're just getting started." The woman nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I can feel it," she whispered. "I can feel the change." Vanessa turned back to the teens, her eyes filled with determination. "This is why we do it," she said softly. "For moments like these, for people who need to see that they're not invisible, that they matter." The teens nodded in agreement, their resolve strengthening with each step they took. They knew that what they were doing mattered. It wasn't just about today. It was about building something that would last, something that would ensure the future was one where no one had to fight for their right to be seen. "We'll keep pushing," Aliyah said, her voice steady with confidence. "We'll make sure that no one else ever has to feel the way we felt before." Vanessa smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. She had started this journey with a mission, but now she knew it wasn't just her mission, it was theirs too. And together, they were going to make sure the world saw what true change looked like. As the weeks passed, the resort continued to transform. The new policies Vanessa had implemented were no longer just words on paper, they were being lived, day by day, by every staff member and guest. The change was palpable, and while not everyone embraced it immediately, the momentum was undeniable. Vanessa stood at the center of it all, watching as the vision she had worked so hard to create unfolded in front of her. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The teens, now fully involved in the process, were helping with the outreach programs she had started, ensuring that the message of inclusion and respect reached beyond the resort's walls. They had taken the lessons they learned and were spreading them far and wide, bringing the fight for equality to new spaces. It was a quiet revolution, but it was powerful nonetheless. One afternoon, Vanessa met with Carla in her office, the air between them thick with the sense of accomplishment, but also the awareness that the real work was only just beginning. "The retraining sessions are going well," Carla reported, flipping through a stack of reports. "But there are still some staff members who are resistant. It's going to take time to fully shift the culture." Vanessa nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "I expected that," she said. "Change is never immediate, and it's never easy. But the fact that they're being challenged, that they're being forced to confront their own biases, that's the real win." Carla smiled, her eyes glinting with respect. "You're right. They're uncomfortable, but they're learning. And that's exactly what we need. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, the weight of the work ahead settling in. The teens are making a difference too, she said. They're not just helping here, they're creating something bigger. They're the ones who will carry this forward when we're not around anymore. They'll be the ones who make sure this isn't just a one-time shift. Carla nodded. They're already talking about taking this message to other cities, other communities. It's inspiring. Vanessa smiled, her pride in the teens evident. I knew they had it in them. This is their time now. We've lit the spark. They'll fan the flames. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a staff member entered with a tray of coffee. As he left, he looked at Vanessa and said quietly, "Thank you for changing things here." Vanessa paused for a moment, then looked back at Carla. "This isn't just about changing this place," she said softly. "It's about changing the world. And it starts with people who refuse to stay silent, who refuse to let injustice go unchecked." Carla stood up, her eyes shining with conviction. "And it will keep going," she said. "Because of you. Because of all of us." Vanessa stood as well, her posture tall and steady. The weight of the responsibility she carried settled on her shoulders with quiet confidence. "We've made a start," she said, her voice firm with determination. "But the work doesn't end here. This is only the beginning." As they walked out of the office together, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallways, a reminder that the change they had started was still moving forward, gaining strength with every step. Vanessa looked around at the resort, once a place of division, now a beacon of transformation. She knew there was still much to be done, but for the first time in a long time, she felt that familiar feeling of hope that this time, the change would last. This time, it would be different.